Good. I'm just turning on our recording.
Yeah. Okay, I'm notifying your patrons that we are live.
Just have a few people here right now, so I guess we'll just wait on them to join.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Oops. I wrote live with the Bowie. Okay.
Good to see you. You look awesome.
Good to see you too. You too. You always look amazing. It's magic.
It must be because my sleep was very sporadic last night. And I have straight up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of notes from Ra to discuss today.
Oh my God, you've been busy.
My hand is just been like, oh, with trying to get that out. So,
and it's like full pages. It's not just like a few notes.
Yeah, they are
topics.
6 topics that Ra wants to discuss. So,
awesome.
Yeah, you look very Egyptian with that Egyptian background and your brown and gold eyeshadow.
Yeah, we were just talking about it because it's very appropriate because we did this background for the last, I think it was the healing ceremony with Ra, and then there's Ra today, and tomorrow there's Horus with us on our Patreon. Yeah, so it's very Egyptian, month.
I can't listen to that.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
What time is that in American time? Will you tell us?
It is at 1 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. 1 p.m. MST.
Awesome.
Mountain time. Yeah, if it's not, Annie's gonna kill me if it's not the right time.
Annie's in the background going, no.
Yeah, but I'm almost sure it is.
Yeah. We'll give people a few more minutes because I realize that Flavia and I are here early.
Yeah, a few minutes.
About 8 attendees, so we'll let you fill up with this here for a few minutes.
Yeah, it's tier 4 and 5 only also. So.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah. If you want to open, we can open it, but that's why there's less people today.
Okay, well, that might be all the best because the material is so expensive that it may end up feeling more like a class than a channeling. So I'm going to give you guys the material, and Flavia, feel free to interrupt me with any questions that you have in particular that you and Annie have about this material because it's pretty intensive. So just stop me if you have a question about it. Okay. I'm going to go over it and then we're going to discuss and ask questions because he has it segmented via topic. And so he'll give a little bit of information and then ask you guys to comment or ask questions on it and then give some more information and then wait on you. And that's kind of how he seems to want to go about it.
Okay.
So I'm really curious about what your questions are because it's going to start out with some basic things. And then it's going to go into a specific topic that he calls starseeds. Well, he calls them wanderers. We call them starseeds and walk-ins. So there's a unique role for that.
Okay.
I was discussing this. I met a really cool person who's new in our community yesterday who does, I think like Vedic astrology. You know, we had a lot to talk about because, you know, Vedas a thing. And I'm like, hey, did you know that the Vedas say there are 18,000 worlds but only one universe? You know, and Ra's coming in like, no, there are multiple universes in various densities and mind, body, spirit complexes. And I'm like, please shut up. It's not your time yet.
Let's keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It's good times. So
exciting.
We're going to go into that topic vastly towards the end of his material. So any questions that you feel that you're having about your struggle as what Ra would call a wanderer, what we more commonly call starseeds and walk-ins, this is the primary topic today, but there's going to be a lot before we get there. And there's a reason why there's a lot before we get there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I'm going to go through my list, which, as I was saying, is long. All right. And I will take some pictures of these handwritten notes that I've been doing all day and in the middle of the night as well. for you so that we can post it on Patreon. So you have these little jewels of stuff from me.
That's perfect.
Possibly can't read my handwriting.
Mm.
So he wants to start out the discussion by teaching about densities. So there are primarily 7 densities that he makes reference of. But since the raw material, there's been an observation that he has brought forth through me that there are 22 densities in the making now. So we are an ever evolving consciousness of what he calls distortions of source. And we, in my community, have commonly referred to the word distortions as fractals. You know how I often teach that we are fractals of God incarnating. You know, Yeshua says we're sons and daughters of God. There are various means of explaining this, but Ra's going to call them distortions. So every time you hear that, he doesn't mean distortions like, oh, it's bad and distorted and chaotic. He means a distortion in the same way that the image that he gave me was like a crystal in a window. What do they call those, Flavia, when you put in your window, the light catchers or something? Yeah, wrong person to ask, right? Those things that you put in your window. I'm going to sound silly right now because I'm used to raw language all day and this fascinating scientific words all day long and all night long. What do you call them, guys?
God, I don't know.
Light
Please comment on it. Light catchers?
Something? Yeah. So anyway, I know you guys know what they are, and they're basically crystals that are multi-dimensional, and you can turn them one way and there'll be little chiseled pieces in them, and as they move about in the window, the light catches them in a certain way, and if the light hits it a certain way, that is a distortion that is reflected back, and then you can see multiple distortions of that same crystal. And if we look at that in separation, then we have their density, which is Earth. So in terms of 7 densities, we have begun to correlate that according to Ra to our chakra systems. So the first density, you know, which is what we correlate to the root chakra, is primarily elemental. You know, all the elements of fire and water and earth. We have the second density, you know, moving up to the sacral chakra, which is primarily about the elementals that come nearby, like fairies and things of that nature, into animals. Animals are very magical, like cats and dogs and horses. And you'll notice that animals have this tendency to gather such a consciousness that they are evolving into 3rd density while they're still in a 2nd density form. So that's why you're noticing animals are more conscious and operating in 3rd density these days, sometimes even 4th. So that's animals, 2nd density. 3rd density is the majority of humans, or as Ra has more eloquently put it, more in the age coming out of the Kali Yuga, is what we call it, into the Aquarian age, is what yogis call this. We are at the precipice of the Aquarian age. We're actually out of 3rd density. When he started the material, we weren't. We were in between the 3rd and the 4th density. But we're now mostly like 50% of people are in 4th. So that's incredible that that has happened since the beginning of these incredible channelings of Ra, which I believe, when did it start, Ra? About 1982? And until about 1982 until around 1998 to 99 was the finish of these channelings. And he incorporated a walk-in or wanderer, you know, from the 7th density, and a scribe as well, named Jim, that came through the 7th density to bring these powerful materials into 3rd density for our, what we call awakening or ascension. He calls it harvest. I don't like that word. I'm like, what you harvest?
Yeah. What are you taking off?
Right. And when I say that, he says, and that is the nature of the distortion of the free will choice. And what he means by that is we choose those things. It would be impossible for us not to choose this massive galactic experiment that he calls Earth. Okay, so densities are not dimensions. That's just kind of a very lackluster word. The word dimensions is a limited, he views the word dimension as a limited, restricted word. So he doesn't use it at all. He only uses the word density when he talks to me. Density is just the level of evolution that you have gone from form to light and then back to form again, which is the way that we evolve. Form, light, form. We choose again and again and again.
Yeah, I feel that dimension has this feeling of being outwards and distortions more inwards.
More personal.
Someone asked, how do you know which density you are in?
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. But he'll explain a little bit about that now, I think. Yes. Okay. He says, consider the karmic implications or lessons, as you call it. We call it lessons, but there are karmic implications involved in the chakra system. So if in your teachings you look at the first chakra, the root chakra is in terms of fear and struggles with survival, a lack of balance with personal safety. That's primarily lessons of that. And if you are struggling with that, then you are operating at that level primarily. And not a lot of people are. The majority of people are operating in like the fourth right now, which is like coming into the heart chakra. This is why everyone says all of the lessons are of the heart, and we're here to master the heart. And you see Ra's teachings go into, oh my goodness, where's his teachings? ACIM, a Urantia book, the Pleiadian prophecies. Oh my goodness, everywhere, most Pleiadian channels, you'll see a lot of Ra material. And these are channels that had no idea about what Ra even was. So it's like so universally put in everything. It's in A Course of Love everywhere. It's in Way of Mastery, it's in my teachings with the Course in Forgiveness and Course in Grace. It's everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And I have not yet to read the Ra material either. I just talked to him and learned. So there's a reason for that. So going up to the sacral chakra, if you're struggling with sexuality and balancing your worth and self-worth in the sexual area or creative area in your life, then you're still operating in the same way primitively than an animal would. So you're like at the same level as animal kingdom. So we need to like get out of survival and out of this lower survival mode. And then in third, that is primarily solar plexus. So that struggles with feeling disempowered, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at your negative beliefs, they correlate to chakra systems and they correlate to the densities in which you are currently evolving through, is what he says. So if you go up to the heart chakra and you're struggling with areas of love, you're working into the fourth. Self-love, you're working into the fourth. Good job. You're somewhere between the third and the fourth. If you're struggling with being, speaking your truth and even identifying your truth, or perhaps over speaking what you think is the truth and being arrogant about it, that's fourth dimensional struggle, and up to fifth dimensional struggle. So you're struggling to go from fourth to fifth. If you are struggling with sight and being seen, terrified of being seen, and struggling with identifying personality characteristics of power in your sight, you're going up into six, which is here, kind of sixth density in the third eye. And then if you're struggling with trusting your own knowledge or getting your knowledge out into the universe, you are going into seventh, with like trusting all your knowledge and all of that. That's where I am currently. So we all have our things that we are evolving through.
Yeah, so that's awesome. It's awesome that this map is also in us, so it's easier to understand. Yeah. With the chakras and everything.
I struggled really hard with the Ra this time with trying to make his teachings really discernible and understand, because as a seventh density being, it's important for me that you understand everything he's saying, because we didn't have that going on the last two channels of him. So if you don't mind, let's move on to what he wants to talk about in terms of what you are. You are composed of mind, body, and spirit. Big surprise. We talk about this all the time. So he's going to be addressing you as a mind, body, spirit complex. So what he means by complex is you are a multi-dimensional distortion of God essence, meaning there are many personalities, many lives, as Brian Weiss would say, many lives, many masters, and you are the master of this life. Let's talk about negative and positive polarities. He says there are negative and positive polarities to every creative belief, whether negative or positive in nature, this belief. So every belief, every theory, every concept, every idea that goes into your action will have the characteristics of either a negative or positive polarity. And the way that you evolve is by balancing the two. You're going to choose what's working for you, either negative or positive, and then you're going to balance polarity. Okay. And that's going to be the nature of your evolution. Do we have any questions about balancing polarities and what he means by that?
Not about that exactly.
Okay. And you guys can put your questions in the Q&A. That's really helpful for Flavia as she's facilitating. And we're just going to go through the topics and let you ask questions as the topics come up. So he wants to talk about what you call ascension, even though he does not use that word. Okay. He calls it harvest, as I was mentioning, and being that you are fractals or distortions is the word that he uses of spirit beings. He wants to remind you that you are fractals of these spirit beings that are in other densities, and they are always higher densities than where you currently are, and they are distortions of you. So a walk-in is not a separate being that is not you coming in to take you over. This is not what wanderers, starseeds, walk-ins, which he uses all the same thing, is not what they are. So they're always you, they're just different dimensions of you. And because you have come in under what he calls the veil of forgetting, which is unique and specific to the third density, you come in to forget and remember in a different way and evolve in some of the same lessons, just differently every single time. This is why it never gets boring here. And there's such a key. You can learn self-love in billions of ways, creatively, every time. So when people come in as wanderers and they're like, I'm so tired of being here, which we'll talk about in a minute. I have compassion, but at the same time, I'm like, are you kidding? You don't see the queue that I see as a seventh density being. I see queues of trillions of beings waiting to get in. So what else? Being that you are distortions of the spirit beings and other higher densities, you have incarnated into human bodies to merge your galactic DNA. You know, this is where the term starseed comes in, not that he uses it, but the majority of humans do. You want to merge that galactic DNA with your human DNA. And this is the galactic experiment of Earth. And he puts this in capital letters in my notes. This is your choice. See right here? He's like, this is your choice, exclamation point. Okay, there's so many distorted beliefs. He said, pun intended, distorted beliefs about being stuck in a prison planet and having fear-based intentions about things going on and you're being harvested in a negative way. That idea has been an interesting way to distort truth. He's just gonna keep on with this word, distort. I'm glad he's funny today.
Yeah.
Sacrificed a lot of sleep and personal connection to bring you this channeling, so I'm a little exhausted. So he's talking about how to progress, and if anyone has questions, just please interrupt me, put them in the Q&A as we go along. You progress and evolve upwards and outwards. So it's both. It's an ascension, kind of idea of the ascension is a bit of a disruption because you're going outwards as well. When you think in linear facet, it's upwards, and when you don't, you realize oneness, it's outwards.
Yes.
So your progress and your evolution is upwards and outwards through 7 densities during a spiritual evolution. And then you merge back into source in the 8th density. Normally bodies aren't required. After, like, say, the 5th density, there are no more bodies. But there are currently, and let me look back at my notes of what he said, 10% right now of the human population that are somewhere between 5th and 7th that still have bodies, which is baffling to him. He didn't think that would happen. I think that was possible, that they're in his time of coming through Carla, his channel at the time, and his scribe Jim, they were teaching that you would lose the body after the 4th, and by the time you get to the 5th, that you would no longer require or want, or even for that to be physiologically possible to have a body. So since then, you know, in the coming of the Aquarian age, we now have, you know, 5th, 6th, and 7th dimensional beings, you know, and we call them wanderers. okay, or starseeds or walk-ins. And these beings come into from 5th, 6th, and 7th, and they start out as third dimensional, third density, excuse me, he's going to correct me, third density beings. And then they go through the veil of forgetting, awaken, and slowly incorporate their process of expansion. And then they get to keep their body, which has been a surprise in his material. So that's an update.
Interesting. Is it possible to travel between densities, not to be in only one?
Yes. However, it kind of, that is what I currently do. And quite frankly, it can disrupt and distort the experience of trying to just keep your focus, because I channel so many beings of various dimensions that sometimes I lose focus and I feel like I'm wandering around forgetting my entire purpose, because it's like this density, that density, that density, and I forget everything, which has been a bit of a problem for that type of experiment for those of us who are currently doing that. Bit of a problem. Working through that.
Always.
Let's see. So when you merge back into source, which is what he taught happens around 8th density or so, this spiritual evolution can only be accomplished by incarnating into a body. You can only do that in a body. So that's hence the big cue to get here, right? And then there are these lessons that are relevant to each density. If you follow the chakra teachings, you will know what lessons you're experiencing and what density that you are evolving between and towards. In order to progress, say if you're going between one density to another, like 3rd to 4th or 4th to 5th, a being must choose between two polarities that he teaches. One polarity is service to self, otherwise something we call selfishness. And Yeshua always says in Halal, more than Yeshua, you must become divinely selfish. You hear that word, that phrase coming out of my mouth all the time. So service to self and then service to others. So basically between selfishness and altruism, those polarities. And the goal in the evolution is to choose one or the other and then to blend them and balance them so that you don't really understand the difference anymore, or even discern a necessity for a difference between selfishness and altruism. Yeah, it's a very interesting concept he has about expansion there.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about that so far, about the two that you're here to learn? This is the whole purpose for being human, by the way, so it's important to ignore this, according to Ra.
Natalie asks, can Ra tell us how he feels we are meant to teach or learn oneness as one and as a whole community in service to others?
You got to simplify that question. Are you trying to ask how to teach oneness to a community of others through service?
Teach and learn.
Teach and learn. That's a complicated question for me as a channel, because she's asking a lot of different questions, and the way that Ra works is he will choose one thing. So let's talk about how to learn, because you can't teach what you don't know. Not as a 3rd dimensional being or a 4th dimensional being. You might on the 5th, 6th, 7th. So teaching must expand to remember who and what you are first. And then as you are remembering, you can then share and teach, but this involves making a choice between the two polarities, and choosing not to see teaching as selfish and choosing not to see teaching as selfless. In other words, you can't overly serve and martyr yourself. That would be actually selfish, according to Ra. You would think that that would be something that humanity teaches, altruism and selflessness, but too much altruism can be selfish to you, and then you ignore you. Why a lot of 7th density beings come in and they will have mastered so many other things, but they'll have something really important like self-love, right? For me, compassion was easy, but self-compassion, not so much. So I came in to learn that. And then compassion became, I thought I was here for compassion. So I'm like giving the world compassion. And I remember crying as a little girl going, but I'm not doing it. You told me I'm here for compassion and I'm giving everything and I'm dying, you know, and Yeshua was like, where's the compassion for you? Oh yeah. Okay. I get it now.
Yeah.
So that choice, between what I thought was selfish and what I thought was selfless had to be balanced in order to survive in the body. So we have to redefine what service to others is and what service to self is, and that balance between them in order to teach to a community. So there's just the awareness of that. That's all that it is for everything.
Perfect. And that's very connected to the question we have here. Can we have an example of balancing selfishness and selflessness?
Okay. He wants to talk about Mother Teresa as an example and about the Dalai Lama. So Mother Teresa, as an example, could live a very long time as a selfless and selfish individual. She was selfish because she knew that she had to ask for help. She could not serve thousands and thousands of, you know, ailing beings and suffering beings, particularly children and elderly, without discerning how to ask for help in that. So that was selfish and selfless. It was that balance of everything. So if we talk about the Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama can be very, very selfish, but it is with great balance because the Dalai Lama is always teaching, always serving. But you observe the Dalai Lama, if people come up to him and they're being selfish to him and pulling from his energy, he is very aware of his life force. And if they come in and they act selfish, he will do this and turn around and walk his little robed ass away. That was me channeling that, not Ra. So he will turn around. He will just bow and give a little blessing and walk away. And some people may view that as selfish, but it's a perfect balance. He cannot enable people with constantly giving and constantly giving to people who would just take it and utilize it for their own selfish nature, right? So those are two somewhat set boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have more questions, or do you guys want to move on to the next teaching?
Yeah. I think we can move on and see how it goes.
Okay. I lost my pen. I think he did that on purpose. I really like pens.
Me too.
What happened? Because I want to be able to like mark off the things that I taught you, the things that I haven't. But my pen went into a black hole. He believes that universes are on the opposite of a black hole, that when we go through this evolution, that we are literally going through black holes, and on the opposite of that, Earth itself is a growing, living, breathing entity that is expanding and collapsing. And when it collapses literally into a black hole, which happens every 4,000 years in the cycling, yeah, no pressure because we're coming upon that now, will then rebirth itself and expand as a bigger, brighter, you know, more, you know, just evolved being. So my pen did not do that. Let's talk about where we are in what we call ascension. So he is giving some new numbers, which are different than the old percentages of where he would deem we are in our evolution, or what we call ascension and what he calls the harvest or the awakening. He said that humanity is going through transitions from fourth to fifth, okay? Right now, most people are in fourth to fifth or at the very precipice of third to fourth, like a little bit left in third. So primarily about 50% are in fourth to fifth, okay? 50% of the human conscious collective. And he calls this the newly awakened, okay? So newly awakened, kind of like babies to waking up, fourth to fifth. Fifth to sixth, that's about 40% are starseeds, is what we call them. He calls them wanderers or walk-ins. So fifth to sixth, he calls this the period of reseeding. So we were in the period of the harvest, which was third to fourth, but it's now fifth to sixth. So it's the newly awakened. And then, fourth to fifth is the newly awakened. Fifth to sixth is 40% of the population. They are reseeding Earth and Gaia. So fifth to sixth are awake and evolving, incessantly evolving. It's a struggle for fifth to sixth right now. And then 10% are sixth to seventh, and they are called the regeneration of Gaia. That is the period of time through which those are evolving. So about 10%. He said that it has taken more than 700 years just to reach the 50% tipping point between third and fourth for you to get out of harvest and into the Great Awakening.
Wow.
700 years. And that is why Yellowstone did not blow up in 665 years. Because we got through the harvest. Otherwise, boom.
Fun.
Yeah. So any questions about that? Now's the time. There's a lot of numbers there.
Okay. I don't. I'm going to check if someone has it. Nothing so far.
Okay. He wants to remind you that observations of moral choices and polarities is important. So you call the choice and polarities, between the selfishness and altruism to be good or bad. You've called it various things. So balancing that and observing your ethical and moral choices in this and your responsibility in this is going to be very important. So he wanted to let you know that his home planet is actually Venus, and that represents polarity as well, because in the beginning of time on Earth, when Earth began to expand into this cosmic library, there were beings in Venus and beings in Mars. So beings in Venus have a lot of altruistic choices that they made to serve and to be completely in sixth density at all times. And ever evolving. So there are quite a bit of Venusians on Earth now. But also they are incredibly scientific. So they would not necessarily deem that as being, you won't actually find a lot of Venusians in New Age communities because they're putting all of their energies into science right now and lifting in that way. So then there's Mars, who had a lot of selfishness, in the polarities. So Mars began a bit of a war, according to Ra, and Venusians decided to come in and just basically harvest the planet in order to reseed, to harvest and then reseed and then regenerate. So there are a lot of teachings in communities right now that Ra wants you to be aware of that teach you that the harvest means that you are collecting your DNA so that these negative beings, who are operating more in negative polarities, is how he wants me to put it, as opposed to negative beings. So if they're operating in negative polarities like Mars, Orion beings and some Alpha Draconians and different species of the reptilians, view it as them choosing that polarity, but you don't have to follow that huge conscious pattern of prison planet belief system. Okay, that's not the point of it. You're not disempowered beings, you're gods. So Mars created a war, and Venus was involved in just basically trying to harvest genetics in a positive way to gather more six-dimensional beings that could actually evolve through third density bodies on Earth into sixth density bodies. And now that has happened. So we came out of what, the yogis call the age of the Kali Yuga into the Aquarian age because of that. So we don't have to continue to believe that we are in some planet that's being harvested for our DNA, for negative reptilians. And yeah, we don't have to believe that. The harvest never been before that, according to raw material museums. The harvest is both a major spiritual and physiological change. You will feel this in your bodies. I am definitely a living, breathing example of that, for sure. It is a miracle that a 7th density being can be in a 3rd density body. I think the beings that watch us and kind of like get a giggle at us still don't know how that's happening. Those of you 7th density beings out there with me, can I just get your hands up, just like, thank you for being out there with me because it's so hard.
You're creative beings.
Yeah, we are the grand experiments right now.
Yeah.
This can exist. So thank you for being here with me in this time. It's so important, and you make me feel so much less alone. So any questions about that, about those numbers, about the harvest, about the regeneration, reseeding, anything, now's the time.
There's one question. Can you tell us a little bit more about each role between those star seeds, please?
We'll get there. Let's save that question because that's further towards the end of the teachings.
Okay. What is the white winged consciousness? And when I see them as white, is winged the word? Dracos.
Yeah. Those are called tall whites, which is a race of 7th dimensional beings, 7th to 8th, that kind of are, some of them have bodies, some of them don't. So you will notice when you see them that sometimes you'll see like this triangle face. I know you've seen them, and he talks about them. You guys have talked about different beings that look like that. So those beings, and you'll notice the long Melchizedek hair. Melchizedek is a tall white being. Surprise. Eighth density. Like kind of in between the being and the becoming, like won't reincarnate into a being, feels no necessity to, but will occasionally govern other races of angelic beings to do so. Okay, so those winged ones, as you call, are 6th dimensional beings that are created by Melchizedek beings. And Melchizedek beings are tall whites. They create a race that is called Elohim. So those Elohim beings come in through those angelics, and they look like they have wings, but they are spans of consciousness. Any more questions before I move on to talk about wanderers and star-seizing walk-ins, which Rob used to be all the same. Those terms just to appease you.
I'm just trying to put my mic away a little bit because he said that my voice is louder than yours.
It's not, it doesn't, I think it's probably okay, but it's mostly that your mic is very receptive. So it's like making these like noises that like every time you move the table in front of you, it moves the mic.
Yeah, I took my mouse out of the table, so I won't touch it anymore. I think we are not in the gallery view though. I think the screen is switching every time. For us it is, but I think for them it's not.
Oh, well, I just changed it. So maybe it'll be that way now.
Okay. It looks better than afterwards in the recording. We have here, Maria Hoshaw is asking, can you tell us how we could become a dream walker to assist others in their dreams?
Ross said, what if you already are? All it takes is the conscious, transparent intention to do that. If you wish to assist others in your dreams, you will innately know how. But following that stream of consciousness is difficult if you're looking for a 3rd dimensional roadmap. There isn't that. You are the creator of that map, he says. So, any more questions about that subject?
No.
Okay. So the harvest being one of a major spiritual and physiological change, he wanted you to know that it began in 2012 and that other beings actually predicted that. And those beings are called Ekankar. Deep alchemists out there will know what I'm talking about, Ekankar. So it's spelled like this. I'll put it in chat for you. So look that up. Those beings actually predicted 2012 and they were spot on, but it hasn't ended. According to Rod, this could last from then up to 30 years, which aligns with some of Dolores Cannon's predictions, by the way, both through me and prior to her leaving 3rd density. Okay. Wanderers. These are things that you call either starseeds or walk-ins. They are, sometimes channeling him hurts my throat a little bit. Distortions of you. So they are you. He wants to make that very clear that walk-ins are not separate entities. They're just distortions of you, fractals of you that are operating already and mastered in higher densities. Okay. So just know that that's what they are. And they come back into third density, primarily from fourth, which is rare. But back in his day when he was channeling through Carla and Jim, his channel and scribe for the material, it was primarily fourth, but now it's fifth, sixth, and seventh. Very few seventh, a lot of fourth, and a kind of half, actually a third or fifth, a lot of fourth, and maybe a third or fifth, and then very few after that are sixth and seventh. So they come back into this third density to assist humanity more quickly, in the harvest and reseeding and regeneration. Those are just different phases of ascension. First, second, and third phase of ascension. Okay. I just use that word ascension for people who have different terminology, because Ra doesn't use the word ascension. He uses these other words that we just mentioned.
Yes.
Okay. He wanted me to give you the example of Yeshua, who was a fifth dimensional or fifth density being, a fifth density construct that then began to come back over and over and over, and is now a seventh density construct who comes back over and over and over into third and fourth densities to help, in that harvest, in what you call the ascension. And he does this now primarily into beings who channel. So that's interesting. For instance, like I said, ACIM, Urantria, Way of Mastery, Course of Love, and now Course of Forgiveness are all channeled from anywhere from fourth to seventh dimensional or seventh density beings that are currently walking in or wandering in into bodies, into third density bodies, to write and to sing and to teach and to give you these tools that help in ascension. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions about that?
Yeah. Kayla asks, what does it mean if you are multiple walking? Feel like it's mentally hurtful in a way.
It's mentally what?
Hurtful.
Is she asking, is it mentally hurtful? I don't understand.
Like, what does it mean if you are multiple walking? Because she says that it feels it is mentally hurtful.
She said it's for her. I don't know.
I think it's for you, the question.
Is it hurtful? Okay. She said, okay.
Ignore the second part. Just what does it mean if you are multiple walking?
They're not, these are distortions of the same consciousness. You can call it multiple walk-ins as a part of your story, as a part of your dream, but to view it as separate is only to gather the lessons involved in each distortion's mastery point. And then once you do that, then you only see a united sixth dimensional walk, and you see her for her wholeness. You don't see her as separate parts anymore. I went through this my whole life, and I learned all the names of 8 wanderers that come in. And then one day I was just kind of like, I just can't relate to that. I cannot see myself as separate from me any further. And I just couldn't. And it's impossible for me now. So that it's hurtful when you try to see them as separate. You view yourself as separate, which is just more unhealthy, what he calls unhealthy, insane distortion. It can be hurtful then. Okay, any more questions about that?
No.
Okay, he said that the next question that some scientists are going to have who are viewing this podcast is, how do these beings travel faster than the speed of light to actually walk into third density form and do this? which I found to be an amazing question. He said that is dependent upon the race, the particular race and species of the beings. So for instance, he gave the examples of Pleiadians. They have interesting technology where they can freeze their bodies because of that technology to travel long distances and then unfreeze like that when they get here. So that's one way. So this is fun science. There are some other species like Arcturians and Hyadians that actually master the bending of light with sound. So because of sound, we can actually bend light and resonate it appropriately. And then the light that you're traveling through actually acts like a kind of like if you were to have a whip and go whoosh, and it comes back, like you just like whip it like that around.
Yes.
And then when you sling the light like that, because of sound, it stretches and then shortens. And then you can it's like boomeranging yourself into the future really fast. So they kind of whip light quickly and forward so as to propel themselves faster than light to get there. There's some severe repercussions of that, like we forget who we are all the time and forget everything. There's body repercussions, all sorts of fun little things that can happen because they do that crazy stuff. Syrians use portals, particularly plasma portals. Syrians, Agarthians, those are inner earth beings that are primarily Atlanteans and Lemurians. They go through what are called plasma portals, which literally stop time. So for those of you working with ley lines and working through the core of inner earth, with that deep alchemy, you're primarily probably a wanderer that is either Syrian or Atlantean or Lemurian or Agarthian of some nature, okay? So that's kind of just some of the ways. And then you have some Talsicians and Alpha Centaurians that use black holes to reverse time with the universal law of reflection and flip it around like the opposite of a mirror. So that's an interesting way. You basically have to fragment yourself and go into that black hole and then create from the other side of it and then back again. That would take longer than what we have today to discuss and probably a lot more scientific theory and math, and I just don't feel like it. So any questions about that?
Let me check the Q&A. Annie's asking, we can have fractals of all of those beings, right? Most of them ring truth to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You'll find that it's a lot more of a centered approach if you choose one, though. Yeah, I'm really, really, really busy with the Hyadian wanderer within me right now. Really, really busy with that.
It's very interesting to see how all of those possibilities are represented through movies and art,
Yeah, my current favorite for that is Avatar. I cried. I watched it 11 times. I was like,
yes,
my people. Yeah.
It's an amazing movie.
Yeah, and then the same with Arrival. With Arrival, I really related to that as well.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first example you gave, I forgot the name of the beings, of course I did, but it is represented in a movie, the thing that they freeze themselves. It's a movie with Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt about they are traveling through space as well and they freeze themselves.
Is that Interstellar?
No, I don't know the name. I can search it.
Someone said.
Yeah.
Haven't seen it. I have material to watch now.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I saved that one for December. Okay, so moving along, if a being, say, in the sixth density, if say they're in the sixth density, they can travel. And this is the way that sixth density beings travel. Seventh too, I do this as well. Sixth and seventh density beings can travel to any part of Earth or anywhere in any universe that exists, any galaxy, any planet, anywhere, instantaneously through thought intention, and then they duplicate their mind and body constructs, and humans call this bilocation. So this is a fun thing to do. And only 3% of the 10% mentioned earlier, can do this. And they are like masters, gurus, mystics, shamans of very advanced varieties. that can do that. And there are still severe physiological repercussions for such, by the way. You really, really must be in your mastery. For me, Kriyas is my mastery. That's why I do yoga. Kriyas keep me alive. And when I don't do them, I feel it. It's a big discipline to be able to do that. So just know, yogis out there, if you're practicing levitation and bilocation and all the time travel and time stopping and all this kind of stuff, please go do your Kriyas. Have your sadhana where it should be. Any questions about those things? You hear a lot of laughing in the background. It's a holiday here in my country. So my kids are busy being joyful children in the background. Right now it's very cute because 30 minutes ago they were killing each other and the cows were crying and beating of each other. So
siblings. No, the only question we have here. So, there's a new question. Kayla says, I feel as though I'm embodied elsewhere. Can you explain this?
Mm-hmm. We will in a minute.
Okay. And the other question was just, who do the beings in Avatar and Arrival represent?
Lyran felines or Hyadians.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. So they were blue because that's kind of more of a Syrian thing, in that way. And then the rest, the eyes and the feline look, that was the Lyran felines. So they were kind of, Hyadians are a kind of an experimental mishmash of a lot of races, but primarily they are Syrian and Apterian and Lyran feline. So it's one of the newer races and we call them Hyadians. Yeah.
How would Rob recommend to attain the 7th density here?
Worry about where you are now. Be more concerned about where you are now, and it will be an eventual progression. 7th density can be dangerous to whip into and jump into. That's what I did. I'm a kind of a top-down learner, and it almost killed me. Don't do it. Start where you are.
Yeah. That's all the questions for now.
Okay. So Earth is like a giant laboratory, galactic experiment where there's this big laboratory, and it's this powerful experiment of evolved life and how life can evolve and how deeply life can carry in the mind, body, spirit constructs, how deeply these distortions can go into mind and body and still carry a mind and body as a spirit being. So we're evolving mind, body, and spirit into one. That is the whole point of the Earth Galactic Library. This is why you are here, is because it is fascinating to do it and you want to. So in that powerful experiment of evolving life that is ever evolving is happening here, and other universes, are actually watching us and learning from us. And we are their spirit guides, as you would call it, he says. So can you imagine like some museum somewhere is like, I must go talk to my human right now doing this. It's so true. It's so true. Beings on Venus right now are looking at us as the shit.
Poor beings. It's fun.
He wanted to talk about the concept of heaven and hell. You are creating heaven where you are. Hell does not exist. He said you would have to be so deeply into the negative polarity of selfishness that, or what you call evil or bad or sin, you would have to be so deeply that only 2 people, so far, only 2 humans have ever created a hell construct for themselves and kept themselves there. Can you guys guess who the 2 beings are? If you can, I will give you a free reading. It's not Hitler. I'll give you that hint. Mm-hmm. Guess it. That's you guys are gonna have fun with that. So
I have no idea.
I'll let everybody guess, and then I'll tell you. So starseeds. Again, it isn't a word that's used by Ra. Ra calls them wanderers. Wanderers have evolved from 3rd to 4th, and sometimes 4th to 5th to 6th to 7th, or wherever they're going to go. Starting at 3rd, they've gone from 3rd to higher densities, and then they choose to reincarnate back to 3rd to help in this awakening process. It's not Aleister Crowley.
Cain?
No. Rasputin? No. Any more questions about any of that? No? Okay. A true wanderer is actually a very advanced soul. And when they are under the veil of forgetting, they feel powerless and they have a feeling of not belonging, and they have many physiological and mental problems in their mental and physical, mind and body construct. Okay. And when they begin to evolve, they're never looking to feel special. That's one of the characteristics of a wanderer, is that we actually really don't want to be seen and don't want to be viewed as special. It's actually really disquieting and discomforting. So you get kind of people who claim to be star seeds, and Ra made a fun little joke about that. I'm so hesitant to share with you.
Please share.
Making fun of New Agers though, and I'm like, I really want to do this. So, so he kind of like, he had a crystal in his hand, like right here, like this, and he was like holding onto it and holding it to his chest. It's like a quartz crystal with copper all the way around it. And he put like a bandana, like a rainbow tie-dye bandana on his head. And he had some hoop earrings, and he said, and he's holding the crystal like this, and he goes, I am Ra from planet Venus, and I am a very high dimensional being. I'm a high density being, and I am here to share my consciousness with you lowly third dimensional lost souls. He's like, this is not, I know, I laughed so hard. I was in the middle of a session when it happened. I was with Harrietta when it happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't stop laughing right now. Do not do that. Yeah.
I love when they do that.
Yeah. And he's like, this is not what wanderers do. So people who claim to be starseeds, but they're kind of saying they're struggling to fit in, or it's very hard to be in their role, they're basically just, they have an over-identification with the term starseed or enlightened or realized or walk-in or something to kind of help them, their ego, feel a little bit more special. So he asked them to question themselves about that, because a wanderer's purpose is to try to belong, not to try to make them, to use their role to set themselves apart. So he says, I ask you to question, are you using this term as a means of escapism from your actual mission to be grounded in a third density body? Just a question, he said. You may or may not, maybe you're not, but if you are, it's just something to observe. Wanderers become every bit of a third density being as anyone else, especially when under the veil of forgetting. And even after, because they want to have a third dimensional experience. One of the scribes of Ra came through a lot today. The channel herself, not so much, but the scribe did. And his name is Jim, and he said that he was a perfectionist in the writing of the material. And he was wondering why he was so hard on himself, because Ra told him he was a seventh density being. And he was very committed to his work, but he was very hard on himself. And Ra told him that it's because he had learned all these high God mind, spirit wisdom things to be able to be a proper scribe for the material, but that he had not learned self-love. So he came to a third density situation. He's going to correct me every time I use that word. He came to a third density body to learn self-love. And this is the only way that he could learn it. So he had to go into that just like everybody else, even as a seventh density being. So your soul's native frequency as a wanderer is much higher than that of life on earth. And this is the only reason why you'd ever feel overwhelmed and as if you don't belong. This has nothing to do with what you call bad past lifetime memories that need integrated, or memories from other planetary systems overriding you, and you feel like you belong there more than you belong here. That's not anything to do with it. It's just, this is not your native frequency. So you have to get used to it. The point is to get used to it, not to try to escape into those other realms. You already are in those other realms. Okay. Any questions about that so far?
Not in the chat. Who are those two beings? No one guessed.
They are Genghis Khan and Joseph Stalin. Mm-hmm. According to Ra.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
No one got a free session, guys.
Yeah. Oh, well. Next time.
Yeah.
Moving on, he said about this, he's going to give you a quote that he wrote down for me.
Okay.
I don't know if, you guys want me to write it on the board, the whiteboard or not? Because I will if you want me to. Otherwise, you can just listen and write it down yourselves. The quote is, due to the extreme variance between the vibratory distortions of third density and those of more dense densities, if you will, wanderers have a general rule that some form of handicap or difficulty or feeling of an alienation will arise. There can be personality disorders, as you call them, body complex ailments, which indicate difficulty in adjustment to the planetary vibrations, allergies, things like that, really common to starseeds. And he used me as an example, and he said, for example, this channel's handicap as a seventh density being in a third density form has been severe enough to threaten her physical form perpetually if her belief system weren't high enough to, has to be high enough to comply, So it's, that is what that is. Any questions about that quote?
Not about that quote. There's a question here. Can he expand a bit more on the importance of self-love while working with bringing mind, body, and spirit as one?
He said, and humans will ask why, and the answer is because you want to. So it's not a matter of why you choose self-love, except that it feels good. You want it as a virtue, as a moral discipline, as a principle to help you evolve further. That is the only answer. There is no why otherwise. You have carried various mind, body, spirit complexes and distortions throughout various densities, and this serves you in this moment, and you choose it now for reasons that are beyond why. It just helps you evolve, and you realize the extreme nature of evolution, and you choose it for that.
Okay. No more questions here.
He wanted you to know that not all wanderers wake up to their full contracts here. So, for example, only 8 to 10% of wanderers are currently awake and evolving properly. And you call these beings enlightened, realized, etc. Okay. There are many, what he calls gradations of the knowledge of being a wanderer. So for example, out of that small percent that are wanderers, they are, some of them are just waking up. You get some wanderers that are not awake, and not only not awake, but just like completely resistant, like addicted to drugs and wander around homeless on the streets. You get that, and you call those earth angels, he says. So that's that. That's what they are. Yeah. The odds aren't in my favor. He doesn't really want you to believe that. That's a dangerous belief construct, Kayla, is what he's saying to you about that. He's not even joking with you. That is a dangerous belief construct. You can ask more about it if you want. Any questions so far? Okay. Wanderers have a view of Earth whenever they do get through the gradations, which there are 3 stages or 3 gradations of awakening for a wanderer. And by the time they get to the second stage, the first one is resistance. And they start to just feel like they don't belong, they don't fit in, they go through various physiological changes, they get depressed, they go through what we call dark night of the soul, as we call it. That's the first stage. The second stage is finally awakening, and it's a big bliss. It's like incredible. There's always a catalyst, something that happens, for the wanderer that causes that to happen. That's the second stage. And by the time they reach the third stage, they're like really viewing what they're experiencing as sane and awake, and that everything else on Earth is insane. So wanderers view Earth as insane and illogical and unreal. So they're aware that it is unreality, he says. Any questions on that? Notice the terminology is the same in A Course in Miracles and Way of Mastery and Course in Forgiveness. Yeah.
That's so interesting. There are no questions on that yet.
Yeah, that means I've taught you well on that. So wanderers only wander into third densities. So you might have some questions about that. And that is because it is the only density that has the veil of forgetting. So if you wander into, say, seventh, why? They only wander into third and sometimes fourth densities. So being that some of the planet is in a fourth density, you have wanderers coming in, operating in those densities for a reason. Okay. And in fifth, some wanderers that are in seventh may wander into fifth because it's helpful, barely, but primarily we're working in fourth, and which is why it's important to be grounded and in your body and honor being human so effectively. Okay. So fourth to seventh densities retain all memory of prior incarnations, which kind of would make wandering into these densities, fifth to seventh, retain no memory of prior incarnations, which makes wandering into these densities a little pointless. So primarily, if a seventh density being is kind of more in a third or fourth, it makes more sense. And when they're in fifth to sixth, they're just doing so to get those beings in fifth to sixth up to where they are. So I wander a lot into fifth to sixth, which is rare because those beings that are there, I want them in seventh with me, which is incredibly selfish. But I balance that out by making sure I give appropriately. There's a balance to that. So I have selfish agendas and selfless agendas. Like I have a balance of both in those choosings. Okay. So in other words, some of you out there who view this from a more New Age perspective, you may say, I'm here to gather up my family. True. Okay. The vast majority of wanderers are sixth density right now. Sometimes like there's a smaller amount in fifth, and fourth, well, it's a little rare. So that's all of our wandering material today. Oh. Now I'm here to just sit and answer your questions for a very short amount of time, about 25 minutes precisely.
Okay. And it says a bit of a personal question. Do we wander together in those densities? I have some images that show up when you talk about that.
Some of us are wandering together and we recognize each other, and then we become colleagues and we join forces for our selfish intentions.
Funny. Do you want to go back to her other question about the starseeds? No?
I don't remember it, so yeah, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The question is, can you tell us a little bit more about each role between those starseeds? And she says, I mean the ones in body now that are working with the chakra systems and all.
Yeah, he says, it depends upon the density of the wanderer. So I operate in multidimensional experiences. So anywhere between 7th and 22nd density is what I bring into 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th densities. So depending upon what, I'm just using myself an example here, if I want to bring a 22nd density situation, it's probably best not to bring that to 3rd. You see what I'm saying? That like there's so much mastery there that you try to bring that to people who are barely awake, it's not going to be a good idea. So I will bring a 7th density situation into a 4th, just to wake them up to a potential. So that particular role is the role of wonder and the activation of the energy of Ek, otherwise known as the energy of the miracle. It's one of the things I'm fascinated with. I'm fascinated with miracles and wonder and magic. So that's those are 7th dimensional principles. That's alchemy. And I bring that new alchemy into 4th and 5th primarily. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. For reasons, because they're ready for it, right?
Yes.
So whatever you're walking into, those people collectively dreaming need to be ready for the mastery that you're bringing. And so do you, because you have to be ready for the negative polarity of what they are experiencing. So for example, my negative polarity that I'm here to experience has to do with self-love and self-compassion. So of course I'm going to be in fourth right now and learning from fourth in that way, because all of my love goes out here. It's very rare for me to learn how to receive love. So everybody that comes in my life lately is here to just nurture me and love me. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure about this, but okay. Yeah, all right.
High five.
High five to you. You're one of those families that do that. And I don't deny it or reject it. I just go, oh my gosh, this is so hard. My heart is going to break while it's opening.
Yeah, you're sometimes one of those that you need to hug and wait for you to accept it. And like, okay, we are hugging each
When
other.
people hug me, I literally, I can hug people. Like if I hug you, I give like the biggest, longest hugs. But when people hug me, like if I receive like a Flavia hug, I'll probably be like, and then I'll just kind of like be one of those little children who are hyperactive and my muscles tense up, and then I'll just kind of melt into it and fall asleep. Yeah. That's what I'm learning from third and fourth densities right now. I have to be ready for that lesson too.
Yeah.
Otherwise I wouldn't walk in here.
True. Another question. Rai's giving me some alchemic symbols. Now I would love to hear from you what he has to say about that. I'm monopolizing this Q&A.
He wants you to pay attention to when you use them, when you serve people with them, how do they react to them? How do their bodies and minds respond? Their body and mind constructs respond. What do they heal physically and mentally? That'll tell you a lot about what those symbols do. So they are kind of like your laboratory experiment right now. You already know what they do to you, but what can they do for others, and are those beings ready for them yet? Because you are approaching the delivery of some of that being like 60% ready and 40% not. So just the discernment of those symbols will be really, really important right now, because these are just incredibly ancient symbols.
Yeah. Is there any question that he would like to be asked?
He said, I prefer that you ask the questions to yourselves.
Okay. So far, we have no other question.
Okay. All right.
Actually, why did those two beings are the only ones who chose that?
With Genghis Khan, it's kind of this idea of so much blood on your hands that he could not forgive himself. So he wanted to create a hell in order to learn from the polarity of persecution. He wanted to persecute himself because he believed that the power of his negative polarity in his actions of killing so many needed to be persecuted. It was worthy. He believed he was worthy of persecution, and his belief was strong and powerful enough to create that. Stalin, his lack of choosing, his lack of action between two various polarities in cultures of peoples, his lack of action caused him to want to persecute himself. Deep unworthiness that would be worthy of persecution would be the primary belief system operating when one creates a hell for themselves. Hitler believed that what he did was actually necessary for the world because he was a wanderer who was a catalyst, and he did catalyze people. Therefore, he felt that he did his job. Why would he send himself to hell for that? And Ross says the same for your current president, who might soon be kicked out of his official rankings.
Yeah. And how does it work when like a being puts themselves into that situation that they make this choice, but they have all those other densities of themselves?
All those densities of themselves agree.
And are we them there or no? Yes. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Kayla asked, fascinating energy wield. You guys use some difficult words for me. Wielding? Is that what they are doing? Wielding.
I think you need to elaborate further on what you mean by that for me to understand the question.
I have no idea what this word means. So
I think she means like playing with energy, to see what's stronger. Moving energy. Yeah, but they do it for reasons to see if a negative polarity can be stronger or a positive polarity can be stronger, is what Ra is saying. They wield it for those purposes. He apparently understands her question more than I do. Oh, Stalin. Stalin's energy constructs were very mental, and his lack of action and lack of responsibility killed a lot of people. And then he would turn the energy around to where they would virtually kill themselves due to his inactivity. And he would meld minds to the point of indeed powerful charisma, manipulative charisma, that would turn collectives of people against each other and then sit back and watch and do nothing. So yeah, that is energy wielding.
Maybe we can elaborate a bit on balancing polarities, if there's time. Is it Pamela?
Observe the reasons why you choose each polarity, how each polarity feels, what are the ensuing results or the natural effects of operating within each polarity, and be fully aware before, during, and after the experiencing of each polarity before you can understand balance of them.
What does he have to tell channels that are beginning to work with him now? Are those teachings coming to other instruments?
With the raw material, he's very selective. He will only let me channel him about once a year because I'm seventh density, so he will let me, but he also will work with other people if they are non-discriminate. So he can, but how long can you hold his energy? Can you hold his energy for long enough to do that? So he's very discriminative. Like, we went on YouTube to search for people who are currently channeling Ra, and we only found like one other, like, that's alive right now that's channeling Ra, and it's a male. So like, that's just what's out there. But in terms of what's not out there and what's not public yet, there are many beings who he will talk to. But can you stay out of third density and fourth density long enough to consistently teach for him? He needs that. He's calling channels. He's looking for them constantly.
Got it. He always makes my eyes burn a lot.
Yeah. You have to be able to handle the mental and the physiological part of it. I have a hard time with the physiological, so I can hold his energy for a couple of days before I tire of it. I could never be like a primary channel of Ra. I couldn't do it. Literally couldn't stand for it, probably. It's hard for me.
Could be done the opposite too, with the light and oneness?
Oh, I think she's still talking about with the way that Stalin took that negative polarity and made it very powerful. Yeah, and you can do the same with light and oneness, absolutely. And that is the density of 6. That 6th density is about unity consciousness. That's what you would need in order to do that. And then you create your own heaven, if that's what you're asking, he says.
And he asked, why is he coming to me then?
You can handle it.
Is that even a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are no other questions.
Okay. Sounds good. All right.
Yeah.
If there's anything else, we'll close here. And I look forward to a full schedule in December, but keep in mind, I do have about 11 days off. I'll check in very infrequently during that time. That's my unique holiday vacation, even though it's not over Christmas. And then I will be working the rest of the time, and you'll see me plenty of times during that.
Yes.
So I see you in the polls, and I'll see you next month.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for all of
Absolutely.
your support. I appreciate you being on Patreon. I'm feeling a lot better, so schedules should return to normal very, very soon.
Thank you for all you do for us.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do for everyone that's here today. There's so many people who follow Lightworker 613 and here today, and we share so much together. I'm very appreciative for both you and Annie.
Yeah. One big family working together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wandering wanderers wandering together.
Yeah.
To write poetry.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Right. I'll see you soon.
Love you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.